So today we're going to make a roasted butternut squash risotto, finished with mascarpone, and I'm going to show you guys how to make a toasted crumb, you know. In Italian I think they say pan grattato. That's not how they pronounce it, that's how I pronounce it. So what do we need today? Butternut squash, medium size. When you're choosing a butternut squash, you want the part that had the root, you want this to be the fullest part. You don't want a lot of the bulb, you want a lot of here. This is where all the flesh is, and in this part is where the seeds are. So if you have a big bit here, it's just full of seeds. You're gonna get more flesh if you have a butternut squash that looks like this. We need some rice. This is Arborio rice. You could also use Carnaroli rice. This is a short grain starchy rice. In Indian cooking, they use a lot of jasmine and basmati rice. And when we're using that rice, we like to wash out the starch. We don't wash Arborio rice for risotto. We want the starch. That's what's going to help it be creamy, you know. So Arborio rice, shallots. You can use white onion if you prefer. Parmesan cheese, parsley, mascarpone cheese. I've got some roasted pumpkin seeds here. You can also take out the seeds from the butternut. I'll talk about that afterwards and roast those. And then we have some bread left over from yesterday that we're going to toast up. Olive oil, always salt, and chicken stock. I'm using chicken stock. You can do the same thing with vegetable stock, but I like the flavor of the chicken stock with butternut squash and parmesan. And that's it. We're going to get started. We're going to start with the butternut squash. Need a big sharp knife, always sharp. Give it a little tickle. And we'll just rub off any of the filament that may be on there. And we're going to start with the top part. So we're just going to remove the end. We want to cut it here, just where the bulb starts. And I'll show you why. Because the seeds are just starting to come here. We're going to use this part afterwards. We always want to work with a flat surface. So we're going to trim it down this way because it's flat here. If we try to cut it here, it's going to roll all over the place and you might get injured. So we're just going to trim off the outside like this. We're not going to waste any of this, this squash. We're going to use some for a nice roasted dice, and we're going to use some for a puree. So now I'm going to cut this in half so it's a bit more manageable. And then we're going to square off this butternut. All of this here, I'm just going to cut up, and this is what was going to start our puree. And then here we're going to do about 1 centimeter dice. Keeping all the trimmings, and 1 centimeter this way. And we want it all to be roughly the same shapes and sizes, just for consistency in cooking times. If it's all the same size and shape, it'll cook at the same time, you know. So square off the other piece. Cutting these up for our puree. And then 1 centimeter down. So there are our dice. At the same time, I'm going to turn on this heat. This chicken stock, we're going to heat it up, or your vegetable stock. I'm going to just put that on the back, and I'm just going to bring that to a little simmer, and we'll talk about that after. So back into this pan here, I'm going to turn the heat on, medium high. A little bit of olive oil, about a tablespoon, I would say. And we're just going to bring that up to temperature. We don't want it to be really hot, but like I said, like a medium-high heat. Now we're going to work with this piece here. So we're going to take the bottom off, and then we're going to follow it around like this. If you want to use a peeler, you can definitely use a peeler. It will blunten your peeler quite quickly though. So following all the way around. Then we're going to cut it directly in half, and you're going to see all the seeds are inside here. What you can do with those seeds, you can take them out, wash them off. You can then simmer them in slightly salted water for about 5-10 minutes. Drain off the water, dry them out. If it's summer, air dried just in the sun or dried out in an oven. Then you can toast them in some olive oil, and then you'll have your own roasted butternut seeds that you can then put on your risotto. I'm not doing that today. I cheated today with pumpkin seeds. So we're just going to scoop out, using a spoon, we're just going to scoop out all of the seeds. Like that, and then the same on the other half. Our olive oil is just about there. I can start to see a little bit of a heat wave on there. So scraping all of those out. And like I say, if you use the seeds, we're managing to use every part of the butternut squash. We never want to be throwing away produce that we can be cooking with and use in a different way. So we're going to take the bottom and we're going to just chop this up as well for our puree into nice wedges. This is actually a nice way to cut your butternut squash if you just want to roast them. You know, you would take these, rub some olive oil and salt, and put them in the oven for 20 minutes. You know, at about 375 degrees. So this is hot enough. We're going to put in our squash. We're not looking for a big sizzle right now. Just like that, a little gentle. We're going to slowly cook these butternuts. And then this is what we're going to fold into our risotto afterwards. We're going to fold in the puree for extra flavor, and then we're going to fold in this butternut. That's all we need in there. Olive oil, a little bit of salt, just a little bit. You're going to notice that I never use pepper. I see pepper as a spice, as paprika and cayenne and stuff like that. I see salt is a flavor enhancer. Pepper's a spice. Not that I don't like pepper. On a steak, I love cracked, fresh black pepper. Sometimes on fish, I like white pepper. But I don't see that we need to season everything with salt and pepper all the time. Salt for sure, but pepper is like, I would say, personal choice, you know? So I'm going to turn this down. Like so, just a little bit. Just going to let that tickle on over. In another saucepan that I have out over here, I'm going to put my trimmings of butternut squash. I'm going to put a little bit of salt. Some water. I'm going to put water just to cover. And then I'm going to simmer this. So we just have water, salt, butternut, beautiful butternuts. And I'm going to crank some heat on underneath that, and we're going to simmer that for probably about 15 minutes until it's soft. And we're going to turn that into a beautiful puree. Here we have our butternut. We'll just flatten that out a little bit, just to make the even coloring. And that's it. We're just going to let that go. Next thing that we need to get ready, this is finishing our risotto at the end. Like a nice toasted crumb. I always talk about our dishes having like different textures. A risotto is very creamy and smooth, and there's not really any crunch there. We're going to turn this day-old bread into some beautiful toasted fresh breadcrumbs. So we're just going to remove the crusts. So all we want is the center. You could, if you wanted to, you could dry out the crust in an oven, and then you could also grind these into a fine breadcrumb, and then you can breadcrumb fish, different meats, you know, for deep frying. So you could definitely still use it. So this is day-old bread that we're using here. So take all that off, removing all the crusts, cutting it into little dice. And then in a little food processor, which I'm going to grab, we are just going to blitz them up into breadcrumbs to get some nice textures. So let's put this in here. This is the type that I like to use. It has different attachments. It's like a handheld blender. You could put it in a RoboCoupe, KitchenAid, something like that. And we're just going to pulse it. The reason we use day-old bread is because it dries out a little bit. If it was fresh bread, it would just kind of turn into a paste in this machine, you know. Because it's day-old and already drying out, it'll actually turn into a crumb. How's that noise?
Ouch.
So now we have some really nice crumbs. I'm going to a little bit more, in fact. Perfect. And then we don't want them all to be exactly the same shape and size. You know, we always talk about having different shapes and sizes, different textures and stuff like that. Well, here we have some big pieces, we have some little pieces, and we're going to toast this in some olive oil. I'm going to wait for the butternut squash to finish roasting. I'm going to wait for this butternut squash to be cooked, and then we'll come back after. Okay, so now we're going to toast the crumb. We got the crumb. We've got a little sauté pan. We're going to start with a little bit of oil, about a tablespoon maybe. And then we're going to flavor the oil first. So let's get some heat under here. And then we're just going to smash the garlic. And then just as a whole clove, we're going to put it in the oil. We're going to put it in the oil from cool, bringing it up to medium temperature. Like I say, this is just to flavor the oil. It's to give like another flavor profile, you know, to the topping that we're going to be giving to this.
That's amazing.
If we were to add the breadcrumbs into cold oil, it would just stick to the pan. We need the temperature to be about medium high just before we start to see the heat wave. Then we're going to add it in without the garlic. So this is starting to toast. In the background we have our butternut puree working. Our dice are still on the heat. They're just going to need another minute and then we're good to go. This is starting to sizzle. It really doesn't need to be in here for a long time. It's just to get a little essence of garlic, you know. And I like, I call these crunchies, you know. I like texture. Yeah. Everyone seems to like texture, you know. Okay, so this oil is starting to rainbow a little bit. We're going to add in our breadcrumbs. That's too much of a sizzle, so we're going to turn this down. Always mixing. We want to coat it in the olive oil. You can also do this in the oven. A lot of people will do their croutons and croutes and stuff in the oven. The way I see is that if you put it in the oven, that's where you burn it. If we have it in a pan that we can actually like look at and work with, you can see when it's getting to the right color. You can see if you need to turn the temperature up or down. Like an oven is a surefire way to burn something as like fine as this, you know. All it would take is a 20-second phone call and these would be burnt. Yeah. I'm going to put a little more oil in, a little bit. It needs to be toasted, it needs to be coated in the fat. Otherwise, we would just put it in a toaster and then just cut it into pieces, right? Which you could probably do as well. So just always mixing it so that it isn't the same pieces of bread that are sticking to the bottom of the pan. Turning it down again a little bit. And then we're going to do like we did last time with the sausage in our another video. We're going to set up our sieve on top of a little bowl. This is just because we don't want all of that fat, so we're just going to drain it off in the meantime, you know. Turn it down a little bit. We want it really low. We want to toast these slowly, you know. There shouldn't be too much of a simmer, of a sizzle. Just keep an eye on this and this. We're going to turn off our roasted butternut dice because that's ready to go. And we're going to be finishing that in the risotto anyway. And then because some of the bits are really small and some are a bit bigger, some of these are going to be really crispy and toasty. Some are going to be crispy with a little chew into them, you know. So we're starting to get some nice color. We're going to turn the heat off and just keep mixing it. Because of the pan, that is what we call carry-on cooking. You can hear it. The heat's off, but it's still sizzling, it's still cooking, you know. Then we're going to strain these off into our bowl. And then as you can see, we've got a really nice toasted crumb, you know. We're going to save that. We're going to let that drain off itself. Put that just over here. And now we're going to start to make the risotto. Okay, so now we're going to finely dice our shallots. Like I said, you can use white onions if you can't find any shallots anywhere. These are just, they're nice and sweet, you know. In the shape, the dice size that we're looking for the dice to be a similar size as a grain of rice, if possible. So we're going to take the top, take the tail, cut down long ways, so all peeled. The root is on this end, so this end, there's nothing holding them together. So what we do is we're going to make slices down this way, as fine as possible. Because the root's still there, it's not falling apart, right? So now we're going to make a slice down to the root. Two, one at the bottom and then one a third of the way up. And then what we do is we go straight down. And then that gives us a beautiful little dice straight down like that. And then if you want to make an even dice, it's all angles and maths really, right? So if we go down here and it's a millimeter, each slice is a millimeter away, then we need to have each slice this way a millimeter away, right? Because a cube has 4 sides, so each side needs to be a millimeter, and then we need to go a millimeter this way. And then I'll do a larger one. If we want larger dice, we want like a centimeter, we'll have a centimeter away. And then if we want a centimeter this way, we'll just be taking that top off. So this is a centimeter, and then we're going to do our dice a centimeter this way, right?
Yeah, so they're square.
Yeah, so it's...
That's amazing.
Whatever the first cut is, the second cut needs to be, as the third cut needs to be, as the fourth cut needs to be. And then you're going to have the perfect dice. So we have our centimeter dice, and then we have our little fine dice, shallots for the risotto, and they're about the size of a grain of rice.
Tip of the day.
Tip of the day. Okay. So we got our shallots finely diced, and then all we need now, we have a little bit of flat parsley, Italian parsley. We're just going to make a fine slices, or chiffonade, as we say. So just straight down, not too fine, just down once. The reason I do the green herbs last is because the chlorophyll is going to come out of the herb, and it's going to stain your board green. So then you can't really chop any other vegetables on top of it, unless you want them to be green. A little bit of parsley, and that's it. Now we're going to puree the butternut squash. It's been roasting for like 20 minutes. I'm going to put it in the blender. I'm using a slotted spoon because I don't want to add all of the liquid. If we were just to dump all of the flesh of the butternut and all of the liquid, it might end up too soupy. What we're looking for is quite a thick puree. So we're not going to add a lot of liquid. We're going to add about 100 milliliters to start with.
Tiny portion.
We added salt in the water to begin with, so we're not going to add any more salt now. We're going to do that by taste. So we're going to turn this on. Nice. So we have a beautiful smooth puree. I'm going to just get rid of this over here. And now we're going to taste it. We're going to take it out into a bowl or container. And then we'll taste it in here. So yeah, 100 milliliters, one butternut squash trimmed, a little bit of salt, and then yeah, just 100 milliliters of the cooking liquid. There's not a lot of point, I'm not giving times for a lot of these recipes because some people cook on gas, some people cook on electric, some people cook on these little portable gas barbecues. So depending on how hot your temperature is, everyone's time is going to be different. So for me to tell you it takes exactly 20 minutes on medium high, a lot of you that just wouldn't work. So everything that we can do by taste, time, we can taste textures too. Nice. It needs a little bit more salt. So I'm going to add a bit of salt. Give it a mix. And then important, taste it again. We don't just think because we added a bit of salt it's good, you know. It's good. And then we're ready to start making our risotto now. We have that. I'm going to take the butternut dice and put them in a little bowl. Just so we have everything close to hand, you know. So these beautiful dice, these are just cooked through. They're going to cook for a couple of minutes in the risotto at the end. But they're not mushy. They've still held their shape and they still have a little bit of bite to them. Okay, so now we have all our ingredients ready. We're going to actually make the risotto. A saucepan with sides. This is going to expand about 3 to 5 times, so we need a pan a lot bigger than we think we need, you know. We're going to start with some olive oil. About a tablespoon, good quality olive oil. We're going to turn on our heat. We're going to turn it on low. We don't want any color in our shallots or our white onions. We want to keep them, we're cooking these to like translucent, just cooked. What's going to help too is we're going to add a little bit of salt. And what salt does for us, like dehydrate us, it's also going to do for the shallots. It's going to start to pull out the moisture of the shallot. And instead of it caramelizing and going brown, it's just going to do what we call sweat. It's going to start to release its juices and caramelize without any color. So low and slow. This is probably going to take about 3 to 5 minutes on nice and low. Just looking for like nice translucent shallots. So like I said, there's a little sizzle, but not too much. They're coming nice and opaque. They're now just about translucent. So what we do then is we're going to add all of the rice. We're going to toast the rice just a little bit. Not looking for any color, but what we're looking to do is to coat the rice grains with the olive oil. And then once we've done that, we just toast it just for like 30 seconds to a minute, you know. Once we've done that, we're going to crank up the heat and we're going to add our white wine. And then we're going to keep stirring. Once this has been completely incorporated and cooked into the rice, we'll start adding our stock. Like I mentioned, I'm using chicken stock because I like that flavor. I'm not vegetarian, but you could easily make this with vegetable stock, water even, you know. It's just like thinking about like different layers of flavors, you know. So we keep mixing. It's starting to come down a little bit. We've got to keep cooking that out. Starting to smell pretty good in here. All of this is for the finishing of the dish afterwards. Now it's all about adding the stock, 1 ladle at a time. And again, I could tell you that this whole process is going to take 20 minutes, but if you're using a big gas stove with a lot of power and it's going to take less time to someone that's using an induction burner that's not working very well, the best way I find for us to know about textures and if things are ready or not is by smell, tasting all the way through. I mean, for sure this is not ready now because we've been cooking it for a minute, but why not just try one and see? Okay, it's crunchy rice. It just tastes like alcohol. But if you taste all the way along the process, you get to eat, which is why we become cooks, and you start to understand like what it takes to cook a grain of rice and how long and what the heat is, you know. So this is starting to incorporate. I'm going to show you guys. Just give it a couple more turns. I also mentioned that when we use basmati rice or long grain rice, we try to wash all the starch out till the water runs clear. We're not doing it with this because we want the starch. The starch is what's going to make a nice creamy risotto. That's why they call it a labor of love, because you have to stand there and just stir it. My chicken stock is hot. We want this to be a similar temperature to the temperature we have in here. It's going to incorporate quicker and it's not going to cool down the cooking process, and we're going to have to keep reheating it, you know. This has all been absorbed. So 1 ladle at a time, we're going to add. So we add it. We stir it, keep stirring all the time. Once all of that stock has then been sucked up by the rice, we're going to add another ladle. And then we're going to start to taste this to see how we like our rice. A lot of people enjoy their pastas and their rices. I mentioned before al dente or to the tooth. They like it with like a bite. And then you can interchange the vegetables for anything. We could make a mushroom puree and roasted mushrooms, and we would put that into our risotto. We could do zucchini puree, diced zucchini, and we'd put that into our risotto. Keeping the white wine and the stock, we can change the cheese to a pecorino instead of parmesan. The mascarpone we could change to a ricotta. So this is nearly all sucked up again, as you can see. I'm going to add another ladle. So I'm going to keep doing this now, adding stock, incorporating it, adding stock, incorporated it. Maybe Simon's going to play a little bit of music. You're going to get a close-up of some rice. Then we're going to come back in probably about 7 or 8 minutes, and we're going to finish this off together. Okay, so just adding the last couple of ladlefuls. I'm actually going to change from a wooden spoon to a spatula. The reason being that the spatula is going to get like right into the sides of the pan. It's still a little bit al dente, but we're going to be cooking it now still for like another 2 to 3 minutes while we're finishing it off. So it's absorbed nearly all of the liquid. As the butternut squash puree, because of the texture that it is, this is also adding a liquid. So I'm going to add a few tablespoons to this. Again, you're going to add more or less, depending on your taste. How strong do you want it of butternut? You know, do you want it as a delicate flavor, or do you want to be punched with it, you know? And then now we're going to do exactly the same as we did with our chicken stock. We're going to cook it out until all of that puree has been incorporated into the rice. And it's just given it like a gentle orange color, you know? But as it reduces and sucks it up, the color is going to intensify a little bit. So now we're going to add some of our dice. Like I said, they still need about 40 seconds to be fully cooked. And we're just going to fold those in. We can start to see there's some nice colors happening, you know. Turn it over. One of my favorite things actually about like produce and cooking is all the colors we have, you know. So that we're done with. Then we're going to bring over our finishings, which is our grated parmesan, our mascarpone, our chopped parsley, and then crunchy texture to finish. It's a little bit too tight for me for a risotto. So what I'm going to do, the mascarpone is going to melt into the risotto, and it's actually going to keep it creamy, and it's going to loosen up the texture. So I'm not too worried right now. We can play with the texture that we like. So I'm going to add a tablespoon like that. Mix it in. Turn up the heat. Give it another taste. Tasting all the way through, you know. It's getting there. It's definitely getting there. Again with the puree. And then that's all it is at the end, you know. We're tasting it, we're fixing it with whatever we feel like it needs, you know. So let's incorporate that. Now we're going to add our parmesan. Me and Simon like cheese, so we're going all in with the cheese today. Give it a mix. And then, like I said, this cheese, once it melts, it's going to tighten up the risotto. So if you like it a bit creamier, just add another ladleful of, or half a ladleful of stock, and then just keep playing with it until it's the consistency you like. And we're close, you know. I'm going to add a couple more of these dice. In fact, you know what? We're going to put all of those dice in there. And then let me just show you guys, because we're pretty much there. See how nice and creamy that is? That's pretty much how I like it, to be honest with you. We're going to add our chopped parsley. Give it a little mix. Okay, so now we're ready to go. We're going to plate up. Just going to turn this round. We can see it. I'm going to do 2 plates. One for the guy behind the lens, and one for me too. So We've got the risotto. We like the texture. I'm going to take a nice portion, put it in the center of the bowl. Like that. Nice. This looks pretty nice. Pretty happy with that. Do a little plate as well. Like this. And then now we're going to add a little texture. We're going to put on our roasted pumpkin seeds. Just a little bit. Like that. We're going to put our toasted breadcrumbs. I'm not going to say it in Italian again because my Italian is not very good. A little bit of that. And then you know what? We're going to go all in. We're going to go a little bit more cheese. Let me just grab some a little parm. If I can find it. There it is. My microplane. This looks good. There it is. Nice. A little bit of olive oil, because there's some left. Why not, you know? Okay. I'm going to taste a little bit first. Let me grab my spoon. Okay, this is the roasted butternut squash. Simone will probably do a nice close-up after for you. Nice roasted butternut squash. Mascarpone. Parmesan. It's good. Very nice. If you guys do decide to make this, let me know. Tag me. I'm always interested, you know. Happy cooking. Enjoy. Bon appetit.